A major diplomatic and economic rift is unfolding between South Africa and the United States following President Donald Trump's unilateral imposition of a sweeping 30% tariff on all South African imports starting from August 1. The move, which blindsided Pretoria, threatens to dismantle the long-standing trade benefits enjoyed under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, called AGOA, dealing a significant blow to South Africa's automobile, agriculture and textile sectors. President Cyril Ramaphosa has openly opposed the tariff, insisting it is based on a skewed interpretation of trade balances, and is warning it could severely disrupt a relationship in which the U.S. stands as South Africa's second largest trading partner. I am joined on the show, the conversation, by Professor Andre Roux from Stellenbosch University Business School, and he joins me from Cape Town in South Africa. Professor Roux, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you and all your viewers.
Nice to have you around. I also have Zama Ntshona, a national spokesperson, African Transformation Movement, and he joins me from East London in the UK. Zama, thank you so much for coming around.
Good evening to you and the viewers.
All right. So I start with Professor Roux. Now, US's 30% tariff on South Africa's imports. This is not a reciprocal tariff. So is there any trade or moral justification for this?
From an economic point of view, it's difficult to find any justification. In fact, there are a number of factual inconsistencies. For instance, in the letter he wrote to President Ramaphosa, that he is imposing tariffs because we impose tariffs on goods imported from America. The truth is, the weighted average of those tariffs that we impose on imported American goods is less than 6%. Less than 6%. He then goes on to say that he is entitled to impose tariffs on South African goods to try to reduce a very big trade deficit. Now, that trade deficit is not all that big. And in any case, he uses some strange formula, basically takes the deficit vis-a-vis America, our deficit or our surplus really vis-a-vis America, share our exports, and uses that to come up with a number, a percentage, then halves to get 30%. Now, if I do that calculation, I get no more than roughly, maybe at most 5, 6, 7%. And thirdly, if even it was correct, a tariff cannot address a deficit. The reason for deficits have to do with the kind of goods that each party sells and buys, and also how important those goods are for each party that sells and buys. So the economics of the situation really just don't make sense, which leads one to believe this is more than economics. He's trying to make some kind of a point. He's trying to stamp his authority. He says in his letter, for instance, that this deficit, the American deficit vis-a-vis South Africa, is strategically dangerous to America. Now, how that can be strategically dangerous when it's so small, I really don't know. South Africa's exports to America, or deficit trade, makes up barely 0.25% of America's exports. So how we can be strategically dangerous, I really don't know. He's clearly got something else in mind here. He's trying to, I think, point out and really make the point that we, South Africa, are seen to be part of the BRICS grouping, which includes, of course, Russia and China. They are, if you like, America's enemies, and therefore implication we are also America's enemies. He doesn't like that. He's trying to change, I believe, our geopolitical relationships.
That's quite interesting. We're still going to talk more about how it affects. Yes, how it affects BRICS. But then let me talk to Zama now. The fact that South Africa is the only country from sub-Saharan Africa that Trump singled out for 30% tariff increase, some people will call it personal vendetta. Zama, how do you see it?
Thank you so much. Well, for us as the African Transformation Movement, first, I think we need to say that when you characterize the Trump administration, since he came into power, you will see that it is characterized by truly shocking decisions, media spectacle, unpredictable behavior and patterns. And not only that, you see that there is some kind of bullyism that seems to be part of it. We have seen in not so distant future when he was addressing the issue of white genocide in South Africa, that it does not have even to be factual. But if he wants to prove a particular point, he goes for it regardless of the facts. So when it comes to this issue at hand right now, we did not expect that the Trump administration would actually be factual to actually do this particular program. The issue of targeting South Africa is something that we can't say at this point that we are the only ones and we will be the only ones. We might be the first ones, but we may not be the only ones. Wherever the US seems to point an arrow because of a particular agenda, it seems as if the US is going to do what it wants. But also when it comes to issues of our position on Israel, we cannot take that away. When it comes to our position on the BRICS, we cannot take that away. These have always been some of the issues. Also on the issue of the Roman Statute, and also you would remember that there's been a call in South Africa to actually move away from certain treaties. So we seem to them like a very unpredictable country as far as allegiance and alliances are concerned. So these could be some of the reasons why we are targeted. But it is truly not surprising when you look at the modus operandi of the Trump administration, unpredictable, goes for the spectacle, and bullyism seems to be at the center of how they operate.
About talks around the U.S. being called the big bully. But then I'll come back to Professor Roux. Now, earlier on you said that South Africa tariff on U.S. imports is just below 6%. But President Trump has been insisting that U.S. is enduring trade barriers and deficits with South Africa. So would you call that propaganda? Or maybe Africa, or let me say America rather, is not truly benefiting from quality imports?
No. Of what we export to America, South Africa, is in the form of platinum, titanium, and other resources, not manufactured goods. You see, there's another issue. He seems to be, I mean, by the way, the letter is very unclear. It says words such as 30% tariff on imports from South Africa, excluding sectoral arrangements. So we need more clarity there. Does that mean that some are still going to be excluded, such as natural resources or platinum or titanium? We don't know. But he seems to be zooming in on our manufacturing. He's trying to prevent us from industrializing, one could argue, focusing on automotive, etc. But really, I mean, for America, these are little drops in a bucket. They are not big numbers. For us, they're crucially important. For America, hardly a drop in the bucket. So which brings us back to the earlier conversation. I agree with my colleague that I think it's more about non-economic issues, propaganda, geopolitics. By the way, he's also said that if we do not really reject BRICS, the BRICS view of the world, he might add another 10% to the tariffs. So he's really trying to force our hand. He is playing the big bully, you know, the law of the jungle. He who is big can set the rules. He who is big enough to set the rules can change the rules to suit himself. He's playing that kind of game. And for some reason, this country has been targeted in particular. Having said that, he sent out letters to a number of countries. Remember, the 90-day grace period expired, I think, or was about to expire in a couple of days. He's making it up to the end of August, beginning of August. He sent out a few letters already and could send out more letters of this nature to countries across the planet, including possibly others in sub-Saharan Africa.
Interesting. Now, Zama, we are talking in some areas reciprocal tariff, 30% base tariff, 10%, then a standalone 25% tariff on vehicles and auto parts. It's part of what Professor Roux talked about, targeting the manufacturing or the vehicle industry, so to speak, making a cumulative of about 65%, if my calculation is correct. Now, putting all this together, Zama, how bad will it be for South Africa's exports economy?
Thank you so much. When we have this trade agreement with the US, and it is reported to be the second largest that we have. It will definitely have a dent on what we do as South Africans. But it also calls into question what we have always called out for. We can't forever have this over-reliance on countries like the States. If he picks one African country and one with a better performing economy, sooner or later, he is going to continue to do the same moving across the continent of Africa. So it becomes important. We've been calling for an African Renaissance program. You would remember the likes of President Goodluck Jonathan, President Mbeki, the President Gaddafi. They were talking United States of Africa. They were talking one currency for Africa. They were talking trade agreements within the African continent, using the billion and number of people that we have, so as to provide alternative markets and move away from the over-reliance to countries such as the States, who may wake up one day and feel that they want to flex their muscle and we suffer. And also the issue of moving and establishing alternative markets becomes very important, so that when one country, like it is happening right now, that is a major trading partner, one day wakes up with a leader that is going to, depending on which side of the bed the leader is coming from, has woke up from, the leader would actually impose such absurd tariffs on a country, we may be safe. But truly, as we speak right now, we will feel the pinch of the 30% tariffs on the South African economy.
Now, Professor Roux, we can talk about how this is affecting America and South Africa in terms of economy. But then when you look at it from the contrasting point of view as regards South Africa's average applied tariff that hovers around 6 and 7.6% across all U.S. imports, while that of agriculture is slightly higher, around 8.5% according to reports. Is South Africa really benefiting from this trade partnership with the U.S.?
Yeah. Well, but can I just sort of answer your question by also adding to the previous conversation? You know, we say that America is our second biggest trade partner. It's our second biggest export partner. It's not second on the list of imports, by the way, just for some clarity. And looking on the export side, yes, over 7% or around about 7% of our export revenue comes from sending goods to America. If you add together our export revenue from Mozambique, Namibia, and Botswana, that's close to 10%. So already we get a sense there that we are already diversifying our basket of trade partners. By the way, China's way ahead of the rest. They are by far our biggest export partner and import partner. But that's another story. So America is important, but not as important as it used to be and not as important as others. Now, that also brings into play, of course, the idea of the African Free Continental Trade Agreement, the importance of that, the growing importance, the renewed importance of that, not just for South Africa, but the entire continent, as a way of diversifying our trade basket. Only problem is that we have to ask ourselves, what kind of goods do other African countries produce that we want to buy, and vice versa? So it must be about producing the right kind of goods for fellow markets within Africa for intracontinental trade enhancement. Meanwhile, China has suggested that they will assist BRICS members, including South Africa and perhaps others in Africa, with a zero import duty. So we're getting this indication of a spreading trade basket, as it were. How will all of this affect South Africa? Well, obviously not in a positive way, certainly not in the short term. In the long term, we can diversify. That might be a good thing. In the short term, a particular sector which is going to be hard hit is probably going to be our agricultural sector, especially our citrus sector. There are some towns in South Africa where you cannot export to America. The towns themselves might have shut down. But having said that, as I said a bit earlier, We're uncertain about the actual meaning of 30% on, is it on top of existing tariffs, or is it excluding those of existing tariffs already exist? It might not be as high as 65%. For some sectors, it might go back to the existing arrangement, only 25%. Who knows? That's a bit unclear. And I'm sure that Mr. Ramaphosa and his team will be asking for more clarity.
Yeah, definitely. We'll be getting more clarity.
5% is not good for us.
Definitely. We'll be getting more clarity from both sides. That is from the West and, of course, the South African government. But then, Zama, approximately 56%, according to reports, of all imports and about 77% of U.S. goods enter South Africa duty-free under the most favored nation rules. So now that Trump has increased U.S. tariff, the question will now be, what should be the response of Cyril Ramaphosa? Should South Africa be reciprocating by increasing its tariff?
Well, for the African transformation movement, mending the relations between the U.S. and South Africa becomes very important. I think if we go the route or the aggressive route, the tit for tat, we may not be able to win this particular war. It is important for us to go back to the drawing board, talk to the U.S., mend the relations between the two so that we may be able to find each other instead of actually be going on an offensive, so to speak. I don't believe it's going to assist us as South Africa to do that. Yes, we are not begging, but at the very same time, it is not going to assist us if we are going to say, now that we have taken it up, you know, what we saw between America and China, what we saw between America and Canada, what we saw between America and other countries, the tit for tat type of aggression is not going to assist us. Let's go engage them so that we can see if we can find each other and actually move away from what is happening and actually find solutions that will be meaningful for both countries. But the aggressive response is not going to assist.
Okay, so Professor Roux, now we understand that the U.S. is bound by the most favored nation rules and, of course, the World Trade Organization rules, which ensures that there should be no form of discrimination between trade partners. Now, if that is what the U.S. might seem to be doing right here, what would be your own suggestion as to what the response of South Africa should be? Match aura for aura, or come to the table for some sort of dialogue?
Said, I mean, tit for tat never works. Already in that letter, by the way, you showed briefly, he actually says if we were to respond to the 30% with a tit for tat approach, say adding 20% to our tariffs, he will add that 20 to the 30. And I'm afraid we've got to be realistic. The American economy can hold up much longer than we can. Ironically, of course, by imposing tariffs on Mr. Donald Trump on goods imported from anywhere in the world, he's actually harming his own economy, because anything that they now import will bound to become more expensive in America for American consumers. The inflation rate might go up, which ultimately could mean that interest rates in America will either not go down anymore or might even go up again. And the economic slowdown is on the cards for America. And the American economy slows down, so do most of the rest of the world. Tariffs have never, in the long term, benefited a country. You get winners and you get losers. The winners, of course, are those industries purportedly being protected. The losers are consumers. And generally, the consumer loss is bigger than the producer gains. So this is a no-win kind of situation for anybody anywhere in the world. And I would be very concerned if we were to respond with a tit-for-tat approach. It's not going to do us any good. I agree we need to, well, stabilize our relationships with America and hopefully strengthen them. And also remind ourselves of something else. Here we're talking about trade in goods. Just as important is trade in services between countries. Interest, dividends, tourism, freight. And if you have a look at that, if you look at our service account vis-a-vis America, we are actually in a deficit. They're in a surplus, in other words. And it's also not just about that either. We have to think about investment, foreign investment, fixed investment, portfolio investment. By far, the biggest buyer of government bonds in this issued by South Africa is America. So it's more than just trading in apples and pears and peaches and gold and platinum. It's a much bigger story of services, financial accounts, financial flows, financial inflows, financial outflows, etc.
Okay, so
Will do
Zama.
nobody any good.
All right, now Zama, South Africa has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. Thousands of farmers, manufacturers, and workers, in terms of their jobs, are now at risk by the reason of this tariff increase by the U.S. Will this not further put Ramaphosa in premium battles with his people? He's not able to find a solution to this.
Thank you so much. Well, yes, we agree that the state of the South African economy, especially when it comes to growth, even if when you look at the National Development Plan that had set out a 5% every year type of growth, we have not been able to come anywhere close. We are miles away from the target. So when it comes to times such as this, it is truly a strain on the already fickle relationship that is there and the trust deficit that is there between the administration and the people of this country. It will definitely contribute to that. But there are avenues that we have not looked into, or we are not strengthening our grip on as South Africans. It's about time that we start looking into those, so as to see to it that we're able to grow our economy. On the issue of minerals, we have, it is about 80% deposits of the platinum group metals of the world seated on our shores. And we are not really treating ourselves or positioning ourselves in a manner that is able to use that to our advantage. We are not yet looking at secondary industries and beneficiation, which could assist this country, which is also another alternative. There are illicit flows that are happening in the country, which could assist the country. There are industries of basic goods which do not really need special skills. We are still not exploiting that. So for us in the African Transformation Movement, we believe, though this is going to have a negative effect on a government, but it is also a wake-up call. A government such as this one needs to now say, now that we see that at any given stage, due to the fickle nature of relationships with other partners from elsewhere around the world, we may find ourselves in a predicament. We need to be proactive instead of reactive, because if we're not proactive, we're always going to find ourselves in the back foot and trying to negotiate from a deficit. It is not going to assist you any longer. So for South Africans, as much as we're going to have this challenge, I think it is a wake-up call that the South African government needs to do something so as to make sure that it is able to benefit the largest from what is readily available on our shores.
All right, so Zama Ntshona, National Spokesperson, African Transformation Movement, and Professor Andre Roux from the Stellenbosch University Business School. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the show.